Good morning. So happy to be here this morning. Our panel is Human in the Loop versus Fully Autonomous Agents, a conversation about responsible, ethical AI. So I have four esteemed guests with us today. So welcome Peter Barrett from MoveWorks, Dr. Brandy McNeil from Public Library Association, as well as New York Public Library, Justine Gluck for Future of Privacy Forum, and Sachin Singhar from Microsoft. So we're so delighted to have them today, and we're going to have a conversation. And so if you look in the app, you'll see their bios, but I thought one good way to introduce them would be to talk about the different tensions that we're facing here when we talk about autonomy. Agentic AI, invites questions about autonomy, oversight, and risk. And so we're going to talk about kind of real world examples and how do we navigate those tensions? There's a paradox there between we want to continue with innovation, but we also want to understand, as we keep hearing about guardrails and we hear about human in the loop. And so with that, let's get started. These four panelists themselves have been thinking about, when trust is warranted and when it's not. So let me introduce them. Before we started, one of the first questions I asked for alignment, because I think it's so important when you have people sitting before you for a panel. One of the questions that I usually ask is, why these people? Why are they here? Why are these very unique individuals here, and what is the perspective that they bring to the table? So I want to start by that just to give you their context. So we'll set that context at the beginning. So in our seats, Sachin Singhar and Peter Barrett, their vantage point is product. When you hear them speak, think about it from product and services. And then we have Dr. Brandy McNeil, who represents public. So being in the public space of New York Public Library and the Public Library Association, she represents public. Justine Gluck represents policy and regulation. So being part of Future of Privacy Forum brings that knowledge and that experience to the forefront. And so you're seeing four different perspectives and how the intersectionality of those things. So I asked them, so what is your line in the sand? So we're going to create that right up front. So when you hear them talk and when they give their perspectives, you'll hear that. So Sachin, his line in the sand is he sees that internal processes are safe territory. Dr. McNeil, as representing the public, sees public anxiety and lack of understanding when we talk about autonomous agents. What are we talking about? How do I trust them? So that's that tension of the public anxiety of lack of information. And Peter, land in the sand, his line in the sand, he sees business services and support use cases as fair territory. But in the medicine and healthcare space, he sees that in mental health as possibly a bridge too far. And then Justine, she is concerned, as you would imagine, that high-risk technologies such as education, healthcare, and government services are kind of a bridge too far. How do we regulate that? And that's based on her knowledge and what's happening and what she's seeing, and she'll be able to give us that perspective. So, first question, Sachin, you said that internal processes like HR tasks such as onboarding feel low risk and ready for automation. Brandy, you said the public is not quite, is concerned about autonomous agents making decisions. So here's my question. Sachin, why should we trust your assessment about low risk. How do you explain what you're referring to when you talk about low risk processes?
Sure. Thanks a lot, Rita. And um, I, I would say don't. That's the simple answer. What we see happening in the space in our customers and organizations all around the world is these low risk, high value scenarios, which could be internal processes, which could be IT operations, which could be predictive maintenance. These kind of things are sort of bound processes that are reversible, that are potentially not going to cause undue harm if a process it doesn't go as we expect them to go. And those are the processes that we are seeing organizations are increasingly relying on as the first processes to agentify, and not just agentify, but really completely autonomize it, right? But again, every process and every organization is different. For every organization, they need to take a step back and they need to take a look at their processes and see which ones are really low risk and high value. I mean, if it's a healthcare organization, there might be internal processes that might not be ripe for this kind of autonomization, right? So every organization, it will be their call. But this is a broad brushstroke theme that is emerging, where organizations are really taking those first steps into agentifying and autonomizing these processes, which are mostly internal, IT operations, predictive maintenance, those kind of things.
So Peter, your organization, you offer products and services to handle these internal processes that Sachin is talking about. Could you speak to that and because you said within your line in the sand, you were okay with that as well, which I'd like to understand.
I appreciate the question. Thank you. Good morning, everybody. So I work at a company called MoveWorks. We work with about 10% of the Fortune 500, but we sell an AI assistant that acts as an autonomous agent personally for you within the confines of work. So building off of what Sachin said, tapping into back office support and services needs. So if you're an employee at an agency or a civilian working, powering the government forward, if you need to take PTO or you spilled coffee on your laptop and you want to be able to order a new one, that's where we view the world of agentic AI, providing tremendous amount of value to the public and the government workforce. So low-hanging fruit back office systems that have been explicitly granted access to the AI to act on your behalf and enforce the policies that have been provisioned by that specific agency or enterprise. Where I draw the line in the sand, though, is when you go into the healthcare realm. I'm a father. I have 3 small children. I don't want them talking to ChatGPT about their bullies at school, right, and getting advice there. So there is a pretty dramatic difference between a workforce agentic AI assistant and then the public service consumption of these platforms that, as a parent, that's something that we monitor in my household very, very closely. I want my children to take advantage of the technology that's available to them in this age of innovation that we all live within. But at the same time, I don't want an easy button as a parent to have my kid rely on a digital technology as opposed to coming to mom and dad to talk about things that are personal to them, that are going to school. And it's a very gray area that we live within in these times. But that's the way that I think about it today. When we think about human in the loop factor, before the AI is ever turned on in any setting, especially when I'm talking about my personal family and my household, we control the narrative there. We have safeguards in place to make sure that we have oversight in the same persistent business as well.
All right. Dr. McNeil, so from the public perspective, you've heard of talking about the internal processes within an organization, within a business, or when you step outside of that and think about the public, and some of these things are being done on their behalf. What are your thoughts there on the harm versus the benefit of that?
So I think it's both. Let me start by saying I love AI. I do. I'm also scared of AI. When I think about agentic AI and kind of some of the work that's being done, I do see great things. But a good example of that is my mom, right? When I think of AI and I think of my mom is paralyzed. And I've seen AI be able to have someone, not with a machine, not with something attached to them, be able to tap into their brain, into the nerves, to allow people to actually walk again. That for me is something that I would love to see happen. I think it's exciting. I think it's where we should go. But what the public has seen is not that. The public is scared. The public has anxiety. The public sees a lot of the bias. They see loss of agency. They see harm. And that's the narrative that's out there everywhere, with the exception of healthcare. And when we look at some of the things that are happening that they are seeing, something as simple as a chatbot that was supposed to be on the back end that helps someone to just answer a question, then turns into, a lawsuit that happens for someone. And I'm sure we all know maybe what I'm talking about. There are certain airlines that have had to deal with that where they said, oh, well, that was our chatbot. That was our AI chatbot. That wasn't us. But no, that was you. And so to have the regular, normal, everyday person go into this and have to fight, right? And for those who don't have that ability to do so, that for them creates issues and harm and concern.
So the lack of agency that you're mentioning and the lack of accountability. I mean, so you have those tensions there between that wasn't me, that was on Bob. Well, that is you because the accountability needs to be there. And then there's the public's perspective of lack of agency, not understanding how these things are done. So Justine, you're in that policy regulation space representing both the public as well as government and private enterprise. So how do you navigate that?
Sure. Yeah, I think as you mentioned, the role of policy, right, is to look at what are the business interests, what are the innovation goals we have, but also what are the consumer concerns and the safety risks at play, and kind of try to have a framework developed that takes both of those into account. Just listening to everyone's responses so far has been really interesting. I know we've mentioned companies taking account of their processes themselves and developing internal frameworks to how to deal with AI risks. I think something we're seeing in the policy and regulatory space is just a formalization of that process. So I think transparency has been really key. We've seen laws passed in different states, in California, New York, Texas, Utah, where the goal of that legislation and that regulation is to kind of be in that learning phase. So to ask companies, hey, can you give us, oftentimes the government, some information about like what processes do you have in place? Do you have safety protocols? If we're talking about chatbots in particular, how many folks, this was just a law that was passed in California, how many folks that are engaging with your chatbot are expressing like suicidal ideation? Like I would just love to know those numbers. So we're kind of in that stage in the policy space. We're trying to identify, so if someone's saying this is a low risk area, the answer in the policy space is great, let's get more information to determine if it really is like a low risk use case or not. So yeah, I think that's where we're at in the policy world.
I mean, Oida, I would say I completely agree with the panelists here, and I think what Dr. Brandy brought up as the lack of transparency. I think one thing that we always tell our customers is that no matter how you are agentifying your processes, no matter how you are autonomizing it, there has to be a responsible person in charge of that. It cannot be that there is a process that has been agentified and there is no one responsible for the decisions that that agent has taken. So that responsibility ultimately needs to lie with a human in order for us to keep this in check.
Thank you for saying that, because that's a perfect segue, because I think all of you and probably the majority of you in the audience think that in the healthcare space, and especially related to mental health, that is an area where it kind of does cross that line of kind of a bridge too far, or at least to make sure that there is human in the loop. And as our speaker, keynote speaker this morning, Susan Slyer, mentioned, is even the clinician in the loop, and I think just even targeting it, especially if you're talking about healthcare. So Justin, you touched on some of the regulations that are happening from state to state. I think one of the important things to kind of level set on is that in the U.S. there is no federal policy around AI. Is that just that? Yeah, and so we know that there are in Canada in the EU AI Act, there are more other companies or countries are more forward-looking right now in terms of these regulations. And so in the EU AI Act in particular classifies health systems and employment systems as high risk. So what are you seeing in the U.S. in terms of states and the regulations and what's happening?
Sure, yeah. So in the US, we obviously do not have a national framework like the EU does with the EU AI Act, which again has classifications for certain use cases of AI, with healthcare being a more high-risk use case. That being said, we are still seeing states in particular start to think about this question of AI's use in healthcare. Really quickly, there were 2 states, so Nevada and Illinois this past year, that both passed legislation specific to mental health care, so therapists, psychologists, folks in that space, that said that AI cannot be used for independent therapeutic decisions. So AI can be used for administrative purposes, so scheduling appointments with clients, billing, things like that. But in those states, as of now, AI cannot be used in the mental health sector, like not only autonomously, but really pretty much at all, unless it's for an administrative purpose. Texas, on the other hand, passed a law that said, hey, we can use AI in healthcare, we just need to disclose its use. And that's something that we're seeing a little bit of a different approach. So it could be used for more use cases than in Illinois and Nevada. So I guess my point here is we are seeing different approaches being taken in states that's not the same as the EU, where there is that kind of more top-down approach. We're seeing a bit more of a patchwork, as so to speak. But I think in both cases, just even when regulation is allowing AI to be used in healthcare, you do still see that consideration that there needs to be a human involved in that process to some degree.
So, Dr. McNeil, yes, I was going to tee you up. Does that give the public comfort?
I'll say it probably doesn't. One thing I think about, especially when it comes to the healthcare industry, there was a recent study that was done, and it was about radiology. And so they had taken some of the results. It was radiology and pneumonia. And somehow they were linked. They were using an AI to be able to do that. And what they found was that for white people who had gone through the AI system, it was able to detect when they had pneumonia, and for Black people it wasn't. And so then they weren't treated for such. And those are the types of things that I'm worried about, that the public is worried about, and that, libraries as a whole, we are really for making sure that people are aware that they are AI literate, that they have the ability to advocate for themselves. And when we think about the policies that aren't in place and how states are being able to regulate whatever they want, this is where people, once again, get scared and have anxiety because it feels like someone else is taking over what I'm doing. I think when we think about trust, which is huge, about 94% of Americans trust libraries. So we want to be that space and that place that people can come to. And when we think about how they trust corporations, other institutions, and the government right now, I would say that level of trust isn't there. And so to then have someone say, oh, we're going to use AI to do several different things in which we know that there's hallucinations, in which we know that there's the possibility of inaccuracy, they don't want to play with their lives when they think about that. And I think that's something that, we do need more advocacy around, especially with policies.
So on the question of advocacy and who should be at the table to have these discussions, so who do you think should be at the table? When we talk about human in the loop, it shouldn't be just from this perspective of when the decision is being made, or, as you're going through the process, but from the very beginning, when you're ideating over something that you're going to bring to market or that a service you're going to provide, those perspectives need to be at the forefront. Thoughts on that?
I definitely think that the public needs to be involved, not just in the later stages. So one of the things I really love that we're doing in New York City, we are actually working with the New York City Office of Technology and Innovation. And as they roll out what they're calling their pilot, which is this kind of smart test bed of different AI tools that they're using within the communities, they're actually partnering with libraries to host town halls and discussions to talk about these AI tools that they're implementing, how it's impacting the communities, what people think about it before they just go live in the entire city to do it. And I think more of that needs to happen, right? Too many times we've seen it happen, whether it's accessibility, whether it's it's always bringing people in after the fact. We created the thing, oh, now we're gonna think about you. Oh, you couldn't get into the door because you can't walk, so we didn't have the doors that just open up automatically. And now we realize that we should have done that. That's the afterthought that typically happens with the public.
So from a product perspective, we always think about when you're bringing drugs, trials or things, we have clinical trials, right? Or other things that we bring to market. And I know we have it. So from a product perspective, especially if you're talking and thinking about it from making decisions, from a product perspective, Sachin and Peter, who's at the table when you're designing these products and these services?
Yeah, that's a very good question, and I think the way we handle it internally at Microsoft is something that we recommend to our customers as well. So we have a central office called Office of Responsible AI, and they are the ones responsible for setting the framework, keeping up with the regulations and policies that Justine mentioned. And then it also works like a hub and spoke model. So this is the hub, and then we have the responsible AI champions that are spokes that are embedded into every team that is working on a new product, right? So right from the start, when they are talking about the features of the product, when they're talking about which algorithms to use in the product, these responsible AI champions, they are asking these questions that, hey, whether this is going to be a privacy concern for the users of this product, whether this is going to require some security issues and security considerations. So this is exactly what we recommend to our customers as well, that have an organization that is responsible for this. And then when you are thinking of identifying your business processes, mission processes, have these champions get involved from the beginning so that they are asking these questions. And it's not an afterthought once everything is built and put in motion.
Yeah, I'll definitely agree with that, and it's a lot easier to handle in the business context, right? A lot of the organizations, pardon me, that we work with, they have maturity models that score their own AI feasibility, and they have teams that are overseeing responsible AI and ethics decisions that can judge a model and have a score to output. So in the business context, it's a lot easier to know what good looks like and define a path towards achieving a desired outcome. In the public setting, it's very difficult to do that, right? With the administration sort of pushing, hey, every agency needs to have a chief AI officer, right? Well, that hasn't trickled down to the state and local level yet. And it's very much a case-by-case basis to see if these individual cities, if these counties have the resources available to even stand that up, and more importantly, the knowledge to know what good looks like. So leaning back on the policy side, obviously that's really important, and it's a very, very cumbersome problem to solve, and it's not gonna happen overnight, but the workshops, that's the first I've heard of, that's a great idea. I love that that's happening in New York City. So from a product perspective, we're doing our best to appease the ethics and security standards for our customers, and also provide our foresight of working with 10% of the Fortune 500. And a lot of times what's working at the upper echelons of business transcend and will also be applicable for the public, but the individual citizens themselves having their AI literacy get to par where the business is, it's always gonna be a laggard. And if we can solve that problem in this room, we'd be well on our way to making a significant impact for the American public, but it's not something that's going to happen overnight.
All right, so final two questions, looking at the time. And so these are lightning round. So I have two final questions. One is looking ahead. What's your biggest hope and your biggest concern about how society manages this human AI balance? So if we can keep it each answer short, then we can get to the final question as well. So Justine, yeah.
I guess with my policy cap on, I guess my biggest concern would be that innovation and autonomous AI speeds ahead before we have a chance on the regulatory side to put any safeguards in place. And then the flip side of that is, my hope is that we do have really clear instances of transparency when AI is being used that allow us to have autonomous AI in spaces that will be really helpful for humans. I mean, you've mentioned your mother and a lot of other folks who, will benefit from AI and autonomous AI.
All right, Sachin.
Well, my biggest hope is that just like with every revolution, it happened during Industrial Revolution, we hope that it's going to happen same with AI revolution, that AI brings in, the agentification brings in a lot of time and productivity saving for the humans, so that they can then take that time and apply it to doing something new, something even more valuable. That's really my hope. And of course, concern is that if we don't keep it in check, if we don't keep it grounded in responsible and ethical principles, and we let it run away, that the confidence will erode, the trust will erode, which is what Dr. McNeil was bringing to fore, and that is essentially going to bring a dampener on this entire revolution, and people will say that, oh, we don't want to use it anymore.
So I'll say, and I'm going to read from what I wrote. My hope is that we use agentic AI to expand human potential and not replace it, and we keep people at the center of progress. My concern is that we move too fast, we automate too much, and we lose the empathy, the accountability, and equity that make us human.
Perfect.
Yeah, I'd piggyback on what everyone said up here, right? Just empowering people to have more time to do what they want. And let the autonomous AI handle all the trivial, mundane tasks of life, right? We use ChatGPT in my house to meal plan what we're cooking for the family for the week, right? I love it. It's awesome. It saves us a bunch of time. But I also grew up, on Terminator, right? So, what's my biggest fear? It's Skynet, right? But at the same time, I don't think we're heading there with the right oversight. Hopefully, with Justine and her policies, coming in, we should all be in a good spot.
All right, so rapid fire, one sentence each. Audience, they're going back to their organizations, they're facing a decision about AI autonomous, implementing it with, or using it, deploying it within there. But next week, next year, at some point in the future, give them one question they should ask before they move forward with their autonomous AI implementations. What's the one question you recommend that they ask back in their organization? Say, we just go right down the line. Go ahead.
I would say, ask this question that, don't ask the question that, oh, whether I should be doing it or not doing it. Ask the question, which processes are something that I can start with? Keeping the trust, keeping the ethical considerations in line, and have the balance between innovation and trust. So that's really what you need to do. Your job as innovators, as builders, is really to go there and identify within your organizations, what are those processes that I can agentify without really eroding that trust?
Thank you.
Sure, for me, I would ask, if an autonomous system makes a decision, what processes do we have in place to involve a human if that decision was an adverse one? So ultimately, a decision would be made by an autonomous system, so perhaps to make a healthcare decision, and if that was the wrong decision, what processes do we as a business have to maybe have a human get involved?
Yeah.
My question is, are we giving AI the authority and agency that we wouldn't give to another human?
Explain the data and the checks and balances within your agentic AI system. if someone can't answer that question, you probably shouldn't be doing business with them.
All right, thank you. I don't know, we have time for one question. We have time for maybe two questions, so who has a question? How? All right, way back at the table. Okay, we'll start with you with the mic.
My question is, with autonomous stuff coming in, right, we basically start with a low-level employee who we train in to be an upper-level employee. With autonomous taking on some of those low-level tasks, how do we make sure that we have that pathway for people to get to the upper level? If like help desk has taken over as an example by, like that's an entryway into IT. So what are the things that we're gonna do to make sure that we have that pathway?
Who wants to take that? Okay, thank you.
Okay, yeah, so this is a real world example for what MoveWorks does. So we act as a back office services and support AI, and a lot of folks that feel that we are going to take away from the value they're providing is the help desk. So locally in the DMV, I work with the defense contractors, and several of them actually stand up practices for their own internal people to not just do tier one, repetitive tasks like resetting passwords and unlocking accounts, but actually get on a career trajectory path. So one in particular stood up a ServiceNow SME role where they get educated on that platform and they move from the help desk into a more fulfilling role that serves the business better and also gives them a career trajectory. So it's a continuous learning and improvement process. The AI is not going to replace what they do. It should remove the things that are low-hanging fruit, but there's still a time and a place for the help desk to come in and those individuals to provide value.
All right. Any,
Yeah.
okay, Dr. May, do you want to add on to that?
Yeah, I just want to add on to that. Actually have our libraries providing AI literacy, and we're doing it in a variety of different ways where we are helping small businesses to understand what they need to do in order to use AI and be more efficient. We're also helping the public to understand it so that they can understand what they need to do. And we're partnering with the city to do some of that work. So just, we're trying to get people there. We're doing series-based classes that will help people get to that point where they can understand how to create their own agentic agent.
Very good, yes.
My question is kind of two sides of the same coin. The first is you mentioned some pragmatic approaches in Europe, and I wonder if the reason that we fail to do that in America is our sensationalism. When you have people like Yoshio Bengio and all these guys trying to push for against super intelligence that's Terminator level and is going to extinguish us all and end a workforce that we don't have the infrastructure to even put out that much AI, it's hard to have pragmatic conversations about where we are today. The flip side of that being, if all these states regulate, all that hurts is startups, not the big foundation companies,
Right.
the startups that can't afford to hire 50 lawyers.
Which of you, Justine, would you like to, what was that?
Yeah, it's working. Yeah. No, that's an interesting point. I think those are definitely conversations being had. I think that there is a lot of startups that are speaking up during the process of the legislation and the regulatory space. I think that there are oftentimes in legislation carve-outs for smaller businesses. A lot of the laws that we've seen passed, specifically in California, for example, are framed in a way that they're really trying to target the biggest companies that are producing the most high-risk AI systems. There was recently, again, a law passed in California on frontier and foundation models that was sort of dealing with that super intelligence question that you do mention. So for like the handful of companies producing extremely, extremely high-powered systems that I think the law says that have the capacity to harm over 100 people or create over $1 billion in damage, obviously that's often not sort of the startup community that you're speaking about. So I think that is being taken into account for certain states and certain regulatory models, but it's definitely still a conversation being had.
All right, thank you. Thank you. I'm sorry we didn't get to your questions, but thank our panelists.
Thank you.